In 1958, America wasn't just building cars, it was chasing dreams on four wheels. This was the golden era of chrome, curves, and confidence. And right in the middle of it all, Chevrolet unveiled something bold, beautiful, and utterly unexpected. The very first Impala. It was sleek, it was flashy, and it only lasted a single year. But make no mistake, this wasn't just another 50s cruiser. The 1958 Chevrolet Impala marked the dramatic handoff between two titans of automotive design, Harley Earl, with his jet-age flair, and Bill Mitchell, the man who'd sharpen Chevrolet's future. Underneath that stylish skin lay a host of hidden innovations, a brand new chassis, an ambitious air suspension system, and quirky details that seemed strange at the time, but would go on to define a legend. So why did this one-year wonder vanish so quickly? And why does it still hold a place in the hearts of collectors and car lovers today? Let's dive into the story of a car that came and went in a flash, but left behind a legacy that's impossible to ignore. And to understand what made the '58 Impala so unforgettable, you have to look at when it arrived, because timing was everything. This was the very moment when Harley Earl, the father of GM's jet-age styling, was preparing to step down. His design language had dominated the American highway for decades. Long lines, soaring fins, chrome-laced fantasy. But now the future was knocking, and waiting just off stage was Bill Mitchell, a new kind of designer, sharper, sleeker, ready to drag Chevrolet into the 1960s with a more refined, performance-driven look. The 1958 Impala was born right in the middle of that handoff, and you can see the tension in its shape. It still wears Earl's curves with pride, rounded fenders, a wide chrome grille, a windshield that wraps like a fighter jet canopy. But there's something else creeping in. The lines are cleaner. The fins are toned down. There's a sense of control beneath all that flash, as if the old guard was giving a final bow, while the new era waited in the wings. That's what makes the '58 Impala so powerful. It's not just a car, it's a collision of design philosophies. A vehicle caught between nostalgia and progress. And in that one-year moment, Chevrolet managed to capture both. But design was only the beginning. Because what lay under the skin? That's where the real surprises begin. Unlike most Chevrolets of the era, the 1958 Impala didn't ride on an updated hand-me-down frame. No, this car was built on a completely new chassis, the XF platform, engineered specifically to match its bold new look and upscale ambition. It was longer, it sat lower, and it handled with a poise that few full-size Chevys had ever known. That lower stance wasn't just for show, it was baked right into the bones. The XF frame introduced a full perimeter layout designed for improved rigidity and a smoother, more stable ride. It gave the '58 Impala a planted feel on the road and the visual drama to go with it. Combined with wider tracks and subtle engineering tweaks, the result was a big car that moved and felt more refined than anything in Chevy's lineup before. But Chevrolet didn't just stop at a new skeleton, they made a bold decision. For its debut year, the Impala would come in only two forms, a two-door hardtop coupe and a convertible. No sedans, no wagons, no compromise. This was a car meant to turn heads, not haul groceries. It was clearly aimed at the driver who wanted more flash, more flair, and something that stood apart from the crowd. And it certainly did. The proportions were stunning. A stretched rear deck, sleek roofline, dramatic overhangs, and those iconic triple taillights. From every angle, it was clear. This wasn't just a new Chevrolet. This was Chevrolet showing off. And here's the kicker. It would never look like this again. The 1959 Impala shared the name, but not the body, not the feel, not the presence. That makes the 58 a true one-year wonder, a car with no direct predecessor and no real successor. But that wasn't the only thing that set it apart. Start at the back, and you'll find one of its boldest statements: 3 round taillights on each side. It may not sound like much now, but in 1958, that was a design revolution. Chevy had never done it before. It was meant to signal to everyone behind you that this wasn't a basic Bel Air or a Biscayne. This was something more refined, more exclusive. That triple light setup became an Impala trademark for decades, copied and honored well into the 1990s. And it all started here. Now look up, right there on the roofline. See that V-shaped vent? Looks functional, doesn't it? Maybe like it channels air over the car or cools the cabin. Not quite. It was supposed to work. The engineers at Chevrolet originally designed it to extract hot air from inside the cabin, but in real-world testing, it did the opposite. It actually pulled air in. Total backfire. Rather than scrap the design, Chevy simply sealed it off and left it in place. Fake, but fabulous. It fit right in with the era's obsession with space-age styling and gadgetry that looked high-tech, even if it didn't do much. And then there's the steering wheel. 2-spoke, wide set, and full of holes. Not a defect, but a nod to race cars of the day, where drilled-out wheels reduced weight and improved grip. In the Impala, it was more about attitude than function. But that was the point. Even in a boulevard cruiser, Chevy wanted you to feel like you were gripping something built for action. And if you thought that was daring, just wait until we get to what was hiding under the hood. Because for all its flash and flair, the 1958 Impala wasn't just about looking the part. Chevrolet knew that a car with this much presence had to back it up with real muscle. And boy, did it deliver. At the top of the lineup sat a brand new powerhouse, the 348 cubic inch V8, a big block engine that marked Chevy's first foray beyond their tried and true small blocks. But this wasn't just any big V8. The top spec version, known as the Super Turbo Thrust, featured a tri-power carburetor setup, 3 two-barrel carbs working together to push out a solid 280 horsepower. For 1958, that was serious firepower. It gave the Impala the kind of thrust that turned heads at stoplights and pulled hard on the open road. And if that wasn't impressive enough, Chevrolet had an ace up its sleeve: ramjet fuel injection. Yes, you read that right. Available on the smaller 283 cubic inch V8, this cutting-edge system delivered 250 horsepower without a single carburetor in sight. It was the same high-tech setup used in the Corvette, and it placed the Impala right at the bleeding edge of late 50s performance. Fuel injection in a full-size luxury coupe, that was almost unheard of, and it proved Chevy wasn't afraid to pair elegance with engineering ambition. Of course, not every buyer needed a drag-strip-ready V8. That's where Chevrolet's broad lineup came in. For drivers who wanted style without the tire smoke, there were plenty of other options. Turbo thrust versions with single 4-barrel carbs, more modest 2-barrel setups, and even the trusty old Blue Flame inline 6 aimed squarely at buyers focused on fuel economy and reliability. But no matter which engine you chose, the 1958 Impala had one thing in common: it was built to move. Whether you were looking for quiet confidence or head-snapping acceleration, this car had a drivetrain for you. And what made it even more remarkable was how those powerful options were wrapped in such refined packaging. This wasn't a stripped-down street racer, it was a full-size, chrome-heavy luxury cruiser with real muscle underneath. A car that could cruise in style and leave rubber behind if the mood struck. Chevrolet was sending a message. You didn't have to choose between elegance and performance. With the Impala, you could have both. But as bold as the engines were, what Chevrolet attempted under the chassis might have been even bolder and far more controversial. Because in 1958, Chevy wasn't just chasing power, they were chasing luxury ride quality, and they weren't afraid to experiment to get it. Enter one of the most ambitious and ultimately short-lived options ever offered on a full-size American car: air ride suspension. Now, to be clear, this wasn't some marketing gimmick. This was real, functioning, four-corner air suspension, using rubber bellows and an engine-driven compressor to replace traditional coil springs. The goal? Deliver a silky smooth ride, automatic load leveling, and an almost float-like driving experience, no matter how many passengers or how much cargo you were hauling. On paper, it was cutting edge. In execution, not so much. While the idea was sound, the technology just wasn't ready. Owners quickly discovered the system was prone to leaks, unreliable pressure valves, and compressor issues that robbed engine power. Some cars sagged within weeks. Others ended up leaning to one side. And when the system failed, there was no limp home mode, just a sad, slumped Impala sitting low in the driveway. It didn't take long for the complaints to pile up. Chevrolet responded fast. Impalas equipped with air ride were recalled, their systems swapped out for conventional coil spring setups, and many buyers were refunded for the trouble. What began as a luxury innovation quietly faded into history, at least for most. But here's where the story gets interesting. Because today, surviving 1958 Impalas with factory air rides still intact are incredibly rare and highly prized. Collectors seek them out not for the comfort, but for the curiosity. These cars represent a time when Detroit wasn't afraid to try something radically new, even if it didn't go as planned. The air ride system may have flopped in the real world, but it left behind something arguably more valuable than a smooth ride: a legacy of risk-taking. It showed that the same company building cars for the masses was still willing to swing for the fences. And that's what made the '58 Impala so special. It was never afraid to try something bold. Sometimes it soared, sometimes it stumbled, but it always made a statement. And just like that, it was over. The very next year, Chevrolet unveiled the 1959 Impala, a car that may have carried the same name, but shared almost nothing else. The wheelbase was stretched. The body was wider, sleeker, and lower. The roofline dropped so dramatically that Chevy had to sink the seats closer to the floor, giving drivers an entirely new, almost reclined driving position. Fins were now horizontal wings. The design language had shifted. The spirit had changed. The 1958 Impala was already history. But for collectors, designers, and dreamers alike, that's exactly what makes it unforgettable. It wasn't part of a gradual evolution. It was a standalone masterpiece. The last Chevrolet to fully embrace Harley Earl's sweeping jet-age curves before Bill Mitchell's sharp-edged modernism took center stage. The 1958 Impala was never meant to be flawless, but it was fearless. It stood for a time when the American auto industry wasn't afraid to dream big, take risks, and even fail in the pursuit of greatness. Just one fleeting year, yet it left a mark that still echoes through car culture today. A machine that dared to be different, and in doing so, became unforgettable. How about you? Have you ever seen a '58 Impala up close? Was there a detail that spoke to you, or a memory it brought back? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your story in the comments, because legends like this live on through the people who remember them. And if this video brought you back or taught you something new, don't forget to like, subscribe, and tap the bell. There are still so many lost icons waiting to be rediscovered. Let's bring them back, one story at a time.